Was I wrong to tell my husband the baby might not be his? Or was I wrong to wait until the child was already 3 months old and wearing his last name? How does a woman convince herself that a confession, timed to protect her image, is the same thing as honesty? The clinic waiting room where I expected forgiveness became the quietest place I have ever sat alone. My name is Solène Marais, but everyone calls me Sol, and I am 31 years old, and I work as an insurance claims processor at a regional health insurance office where I review medical bills, match codes to procedures, and spend the quiet hours between files convincing myself that the choices I have made are the kind any woman in my position would make. I have been married 5 years to Vaughan Killer, who is 34 and works as a warehouse logistics coordinator at a regional distribution centre. And he is the kind of man who reads instruction manuals before assembling anything, who checks the weight limit on a shelf before loading it, and who applied that same careful, measured patience to building our nursery, sanding each point of a handmade wooden star mobile so nothing could scratch the baby's reaching fingers. He proposed with a ring he saved for over a year because he wanted the setting to match a story I once told him about my grandmother's garden, and he remembers details the way his warehouse tracks inventory, precisely permanently, filed in a system that does not lose what it stores. On a Tuesday evening in March at 6:40 p.m, I sat in the passenger seat of our grey sedan on level 3 of the hospital parking garage, watching Vaughan secure our son's infant car seat into the back seat with the concentration of a man who had read the installation manual twice and watched 3 tutorials. Theo was 3 days old. The parking garage smelled of concrete dust and the faint chemical sweetness of new plastic from the car seat's packaging, which Vaughan had cut open in this same spot 3 days ago when we arrived for the delivery. The elevator bank was 20 feet away, the same elevator that carried us upstairs when my contractions were 8 minutes apart and carried us back down with a baby, a diaper bag, and a birth certificate signed in blue ink with Vaughan's full name on the father line. Theo slept in the car seat wrapped in the pale blue blanket his grandmother Nadege had knitted with the initials TA in cream yarn, Theo Achille, 3 months of evening needlework for a grandchild she believed carried her family's blood. My phone resting on my thigh buzzed with a text from a contact saved as IT help desk. The preview showed a single line and an emoji. I swiped it before Vaughan closed the trunk. The affair lasted 4 months, October through January, with Declan Voss, 29, the IT support technician at my insurance office. It started at the holiday party and ended when I decided that a positive pregnancy test required a clean narrative, which meant Declan's role had to be edited from participant to background before the baby arrived. The problem was the timeline. Theo was conceived in late October or early November, and the affair began in the first week of October. The conception window included both Vaughan and Declan. I chose not to calculate probabilities because probabilities require acknowledgement, and acknowledgement requires a conversation I decided the family did not need. I told myself the baby looked like Vaughan, the forehead, the ears, the way his hands curled. But resemblance at 3 days is a mirror parents build from hope, not from evidence. My phone was synced to the shared household tablet through iCloud. I had deleted the message threads from my phone in January. I did not check whether the cloud backup retained them. The nursery was ready when we arrived home, the crib Vaughan assembled over 2 weekends, the wooden star mobile he carved from scrap oak, the changing table stocked with supplies, and the knitted blanket draped over the crib rail. Theo's hospital wristband, a thin plastic strip printed with his name, birth date, and Parent Achille, V, was clipped to the interior pocket of the diaper bag hanging on the nursery door hook. In the living room, the shared tablet sat on its charging station, screen dark, connected to my iCloud account. Friday morning, nursery, 7:30. Vaughan packing the diaper bag for Theo's 1-week checkup. He mentioned the car seat, the one he spent 3 weeks researching, and said while he was locking the base into the anchor in the parking garage, he saw me swipe a notification with a speed that suggested the message was not meant for his eyes. He asked who texted me at 6:40 on Tuesday, because a message swiped during the drive home from the hospital with our newborn was a detail that had stayed with him through 3 nights of feedings. He asked me to open the IT help desk contact and show the thread, because an IT help desk does not send texts with emojis at 6:40 p.m., and the contact name did not match anyone I had ever mentioned. He said a new father who sees his wife swipe a message from an unnamed contact in a hospital parking garage while their 3-day-old sleeps in the back seat needs the weight distributed or explained. He suggested I show him the phone for 30 seconds, and if the content was work-related, the subject would close. I zipped the diaper bag and said the text was from the office IT department confirming my out-of-office reply was active during maternity leave, that IT sends automated messages at all hours, and that a husband who monitors phone swipes 3 days after the birth has confused the delivery room with a surveillance operation. The hospital wristband on the diaper bag caught the nursery light. Parent. Achille. V. In faded thermal ink. That night, 11 o'clock, Theo asleep in the crib. Vaughan, on the mattress edge. He mentioned the checkup form from earlier, the clipboard where I answered the paternal family history section without hesitation, listing Vaughan's family conditions, and said the speed of my response suggested rehearsal rather than recall. He asked whether there was anything about Theo's conception or timeline I had not shared, because the checkup form assumes the man who signed the birth certificate is the biological father, and if that assumption needed a footnote, he would rather hear it now. He asked me to confirm Theo was conceived in the time frame we discussed, because he remembered being away for a distribution centre training seminar from October 18th to 22nd, and the conception window the doctor mentioned included those 4 days. He said a man who signed a birth certificate and named his son after his dead grandfather deserved certainty that the name on the document matched the biology. I put my phone face down on the nightstand and said questioning my fidelity during maternity leave because of a checkup form was the behaviour of a man who decided fatherhood was conditional on paperwork rather than presence, and that biology was a technicality men use to avoid the harder work of commitment. The heating vent hummed in the nursery across the hall, and the wooden stars continued their slow rotation above the crib. Saturday morning, Vaughan took Theo for a stroller walk on the riverside path. On his phone calendar, a new entry appeared. Flint and Paw, 8:15 a.m. That night, the shared tablet completed its iCloud backup restore at 3:17 a.m., a routine sync triggered by my phone's software update. The restore pulled 4 months of deleted messages and deposited them into the tablet's Messages app, sitting between grocery lists and streaming reminders, waiting for someone to scroll past the weekly meal plan into the October thread that began with a message from DV reading, "Can't stop thinking about last night." Sunday. I picked up the tablet to add items to the grocery list. I opened notes, typed diapers, formula, wipes, and put the tablet back on the charging station without opening messages. The restored texts sat one app icon away from the grocery list, and the tablet returned to its dock with the screen dark and the evidence intact. 47 messages from an affair stored on a device we used for streaming children's lullabies. Monday morning, Vaughan returned from Flint and Paw, 8:15 a.m., with a stillness in his posture I read as early morning fatigue. That evening he went to bed at 8:45, 45 minutes early. He stopped initiating conversation during night feedings. His phone moved from the coffee table to the back pocket of his jeans at all times. He began checking the mail at the lobby mailbox before coming upstairs, sorting envelopes alone in the stairwell. Tuesday morning, bedroom, 7 o'clock, Theo napping in the nursery. Vaughan was tying his work boots. He mentioned the joint credit card statement, the paper one he opened in the stairwell, and a $42 charge at Harbour Inn Express at 12:35 p.m. on a Tuesday in August during my 6th month of pregnancy. He said Harbour Inn Express was 3 blocks from my office and 13 miles from any restaurant I had mentioned. He asked what the charge was for, because $42 at a hotel during a lunch break did not match a meal, and a day room during a work day. Tuesday required a companion or an explanation the word lunch could not cover. He offered to call Harbour Inn Express together and ask what service the charge covered, and if the answer was innocent, the statement would go in the recycling. I tied my robe and said, "Men who audit hotel charges on joint credit cards during maternity leave have confused marriage with an expense report, and that Harbour Inn Express has a ground-floor cafe where I met a colleague for coffee during a work break." The credit card statement sat on the dresser beside the baby monitor, the Harbour Inn line circled in pencil with Vaughan's neat hand. Wednesday at the insurance office break room, a narrow space with a refrigerator, a microwave, and a bulletin board of compliance notices. I sat with my co-worker Gemma and told her Vaughan had become forensic about the credit card, circling charges like a warehouse auditor reviewing inventory discrepancies. She asked if everything was okay at home. I said Vaughan was not adapting to the baby and was channeling anxiety into paperwork instead of parenting. Across the break room, Declan passed the doorway with a laptop under his arm, and his eyes flicked toward me for half a second before continuing. Gemma's gaze followed his path down the hallway. Wednesday evening, living room, 9:30. The tablet on the charging station, Theo in his bouncer. Vaughan sat on the couch with the baby monitor. He mentioned a call to the distribution centre's front desk, a woman asking about his shift schedule in a tone his co-worker Hector described as rehearsed, asking which days Vaughan worked late and whether he took lunch off-site. He said the area code matched the insurance office's main line. He asked whether I told anyone at the office to call the centre about his schedule, because the level of detail, late nights, off-site lunches, came from someone who was told, not someone who guessed. He said a wife whose co-worker calls her husband's workplace to check his schedule while she has a $42 hotel charge and an unexplained contact on her phone has created a pattern no single answer could neutralize. He suggested I find out who made the call and bring back an explanation. I stood from the couch and said I would not interrogate colleagues because my husband received a phone call he could not trace, and that weaponizing a random inquiry against a woman 3 weeks postpartum was the behavior of a warden, not a partner. I walked to the bedroom. The tablet on the charging station glowed with a sync notification. Backup updated, and the screen went dark. Vaughan looked at the tablet but did not pick it up. Through the baby monitor, Theo's breathing came in soft, rhythmic rasps. At the distribution centre Thursday, Hector found Vaughan at the loading dock during the afternoon break. He said a man named Declan from the IT department had come to the centre 2 weeks ago to service the network router in the front office and spent 15 minutes at the reception desk asking about Vaughan by name. Hector could not explain why an IT technician from an insurance company would service routers at a logistics warehouse using a different network provider. Vaughan photographed the front desk visitor log, DVOS, IT support, 2:15 p.m., and sent the photo to his own email. Friday evening, I opened the shared tablet to stream a show while nursing. During the stream, a notification banner appeared at the top of the screen. DV, just checking. You okay? Haven't heard from you since. The banner disappeared in 4 seconds. My thumb was on the streaming controls. I told myself it was spam. On the nightstand in the bedroom, Vaughan's phone lit with a calendar alert. Flint and Pour, 11 a.m. Tuesday, illuminating the ceiling for 2 seconds before he dismissed it. Saturday, Vaughan took Theo to the Riverside Path. At the halfway bench, he opened the tablet's messages app on his own synced device and scrolled past the grocery list into October. The first message from DV read, "Can't stop thinking about last night." The next morning, "You're going to have to tell him eventually." From November during the conception window, "What if it's ours?" He read 12 messages and screenshotted each one with timestamps. He closed the app and pushed the stroller back along the river. On the tablet at home, the messages icon showed a red badge with the number 47. Unread messages from a thread I thought I had deleted, restored by a cloud that does not forget what its users choose to erase. Taverna Lupo was a family-owned Italian restaurant with red leather booths, a long communal table, and the smell of rosemary focaccia and braised lamb. Nadija's 62nd birthday dinner, 15 guests along both sides, candles in glass holders, and a centerpiece of autumn branches and small pumpkins she arranged herself. Theo's car seat rested beside my chair under the table's edge, the pale blue blanket visible with the initials TA facing up. Vaughan sat across from me wearing the navy button-down Nadij bought him because it matched his grandfather's eyes. Hector was at the far end. My sister Ondine arrived late and took the seat beside me. At 8:15 I stood with a box at the warehouse, careful, measured, always checking the weight limit before lifting. I paused while 3 people processed the sentence. I said some men are natural fathers and some men need the manual and the manager. And I loved that Vaughan was the kind who reads every instruction before assembling the simplest thing, even when the simplest thing was love. I raised my glass. A few people laughed. Hector set his fork on the red napkin. Nadij's hands moved below the table. A cousin at the end held up her phone and recorded 11 seconds. Vaughan lifted his water glass with no expression and drank. The candle nearest my champagne flickered in the draught from the kitchen door, and wax dripped onto the white cloth in a slow line nobody acknowledged. Saturday night. Nursery. 10:30. Theo on the changing table. Vaughan mentioned the knitted blanket in the car seat, the one Nadej made with Theo's initials, and said his mother spent 3 months knitting for a grandchild whose father was just compared to a warehouse pallet loader at her own birthday dinner. He asked why I chose his mother's birthday to tell 15 people he holds his son like cargo, because the description reduced his bond with Theo to a logistics exercise in front of the woman who taught him how to hold a child. He asked whether the toast was rehearsed, because the manual and manager line had a cadence and a pause that suggested preparation, and a wife who prepares a public critique of her husband's parenting for delivery at his mother's birthday table has invested effort in the humiliation rather than stumbling into it. He said a man who hears his wife describe his fatherhood as a warehouse operation while their son sleeps beneath a blanket knitted by the grandmother who witnessed it cannot pretend the words were absorbed by the tablecloth. He asked me to call Nadij tomorrow and say something genuine. I fastened Theo's onesie and said the table laughed, that Ondine clapped, that Nadij was always too serious about jokes, and that asking a new mother to call her mother-in-law to apologize for a birthday toast was the most dramatic request a man could make during a diaper change. The changing table's warmer hummed beneath Theo, and the baby lotion Vaughan had applied earlier filled the nursery with a powder scent the toast had tried to deny existed. Sunday morning, bedroom, 8:30. Vaughan mentioned the navy shirt Nadij bought him, the one that matched his grandfather's eyes, and said the grandfather whose memory that shirt honoured was the same man whose name sat on the birth certificate, and a wife who mocked the father at a table set for the grandmother had insulted both generations in one toast. He asked whether the toast was connected to a deeper doubt about his fatherhood, because calling a man an unnatural parent in public while carrying an unresolved private question about paternity creates a pattern where the public mockery disguises the private uncertainty. He asked whether Declan Voss, the IT technician who visited the distribution centre and signed the front desk log at 2:15 p.m., was the same person saved as IT help desk in my phone, because an IT technician from the insurance office servicing routers at a warehouse that uses a different network was a man visiting a building for a reason the job description could not explain. He suggested a full weekend off from events and social media to talk honestly about the marriage and whatever I was carrying that I had not said. I pulled a sweater from the closet and said a man who connected an IT service visit to a birthday toast to a paternity theory had built a conspiracy from cubicle wiring and champagne glasses, and the weekend off was isolation dressed as rest. I said Declan serviced equipment across buildings, the visit was routine, and asking a mother to defend her IT department's travel schedule while her baby napped was a man trusting shipping logs more than the woman he married. After his Tuesday meeting, Flint and Paw, 11 a.m. Vaughan opened the mail alone in the stairwell, moved his wallet and car keys from the kitchen counter to a zippered pocket inside his work jacket, and asked casually at dinner whether the baby's insurance was billed to our joint account or his employer. I said joint. He nodded. After Theo's bedtime, he sat at the small living room desk for 30 minutes, minimizing the laptop screen when I approached. Monday, Nadege called Vaughan on his lunch break. She said she had knitted blankets for 3 grandchildren and never had a father mocked while she cut her own birthday cake. She said she saw something in my face during the toast that was not humour. It was a woman performing a truth she had not yet spoken aloud. The 11-second cousins video appeared on a close friend's Instagram story with fire emojis and 27 views. Aunt Josefa's name, here, Nadege, on the viewer list. On the living room desk beside Vaughan's closed laptop sat a thin manila envelope, unsealed, its flap tucked inside, waiting for content that had not yet arrived. Thursday, 2:15 p.m., the pharmacy drive-through at Wellspring Pharmacy, Lane 2. I was in the driver's seat with Theo in the car seat behind me, the prescription number on the electronic board. A woman walked toward my window from the parking lot, dark hair, white dental scrubs, a manila folder in her hand. Marisol Voss. She tapped on the passenger glass. I lowered it. She introduced herself as Declan's wife and said she found messages on their shared tablet between her husband and me. The same cloud sync problem in reverse. She said the messages spanned 4 months, included references to Harbour Inn Express, and contained a message from Declan dated 3 weeks before Theo's birth reading. What if it's mine? She said she had screenshots and had already contacted Vaughan through a mutual connection. The pharmacy speaker crackled with the technician announcing the prescription. I did not drive forward. The hand sanitizer dispenser mounted on the drive-through pillar caught the afternoon sun, and the antiseptic smell drifted through the open window, mixing with exhaust and Marisol's controlled anger. I told Marisol that Declan pursued me, that the messages were one-sided, and the paternity question was his projection. She opened the folder and showed me one screenshot, a message from me to Declan, not the other direction. I keep wondering the same thing. The timestamp was 3 weeks before the birth. She closed the folder, said copies were already sent, and walked back to the lot. Theo slept in the back seat. The hospital wristband was visible through the diaper bag's zipper beside the car seat. That evening, living room, 9 o'clock, Theo in the crib, the tablet on the charging station. Vaughan sat on the couch with the baby monitor. He said the screen they used for grocery lists and streaming now held 47 messages between me and a man named Declan that included hotel reservations, conception window timestamps, and a conversation about whether the baby carried the right father's name. He asked whether I keep wondering the same thing, sent from my phone to Declan 3 weeks before the birth, meant what it appeared to mean, that I shared Declan's uncertainty about Theo's paternity and chose not to tell the man building a nursery and signing a birth certificate in the next room. He asked how a brief emotional connection with no physical component produced a $42 hotel charge, 47 messages over 4 months, and a mutual conversation about whether the baby belonged to the husband or the co-worker. Because emotional connections do not check into hotels, and Harbour Inn charges a day room rate, not a therapy fee. He said a man who signed a birth certificate with his grandfather's name carved a mobile for the crib and took unpaid leave for a child whose paternity was documented as uncertain on a household device had a right to certainty no emotional plea could replace. He suggested one path. She agrees to a voluntary DNA test, private, just the 2 of them, and the lab. And if the result confirmed Theo was his, everything rebuilds. My eyes filled. I said I made a mistake during the most vulnerable period of my life, that pregnancy hormones distorted my judgment and the messages were emotional, not physical. I said Harbour Inn was a cafe meeting and the wondering message was confusion. I regretted the moment I pressed send. I said a DNA test would destroy our bond because a father who needs a lab result to love his child is a father whose love was always conditional. I asked him to look at the nursery, the crib, the mobile, the blanket, and tell me whether that room was built by a man who needed a swab to confirm what his hands already knew. The baby monitor between us showed Theo's crib on its small screen, wooden stars rotating above the sleeping baby, the blanket with the initials visible in the night vision grain. Friday, Marisol's screenshots reached Nadej through Hector's wife. By Saturday morning, Nadej had seen 4 messages, including, "What if it's mine?" And I keep wondering the same thing. She called Vaughan and asked one question. Does the child carry the right name? Vaughan said he was working on finding out. Nadej said the A in TA stands for a family that has never needed a lab. But if a lab is what this requires, she will drive her grandson to the appointment herself. She said the blanket stays regardless of the result because she knitted it for the child, not for the chromosome. Saturday evening, bedroom, 10 o'clock. Vaughan mentioned the wooden star mobile, the one he carved from scrap oak, sanding each point so nothing could scratch reaching fingers, and said the mobile was built by a man who believed he was building for his son, and if the belief requires verification, the verification is a debt owed to the builder, not a threat to the child. He asked whether every piece of the nursery was built on a foundation she knew was stable or one she suspected was cracked. He asked why, if the affair was emotional and not physical, the what if it's mine. Conversation existed because an emotional affair does not produce a paternity question, and a paternity question requires a physical event the emotional connection story explicitly denies. He said every conversation produced a new layer of the same concealment. He offered no compromise. He said the next step would not involve a conversation between the two of them. I threw back the covers and said demanding a DNA test of a 3-month-old was a weapon, not a tool, and a father who reaches for it instead of reaching for his child has failed the test that matters. I walked to the nursery and closed the door. The hospital wristband was no longer in the diaper bag. Sunday, 5:30 a.m. Vaughan lifted the wristband from the crib rail, placed it in a white business envelope, wrote the date and T. Achille, original wristband, on the exterior, sealed it, and placed it in his work jacket's interior pocket. He fed Theo in the rocking chair beneath the wooden stars. When I arrived at 6:15, the crib rail where the wristband had hung was bare, and Vaughan's warmth was directed entirely at the baby in his arms, at the bottle, the melody, the stars, at everything except the woman in the doorway. Vivette called Tuesday evening. She said Nadej had shown her 2 screenshots at the school library. She asked whether there was a chance Theo was not Vaughan's. I said the messages were hormonal venting taken out of context. She went quiet for 7 seconds and said a screenshot of a mother's own words acknowledging paternity uncertainty is not context. It is content. Wednesday morning, Vaughan told me calmly over breakfast that the paediatrician confirmed Theo's 3-month checkup for Friday at 10 a.m. He asked me to bring the insurance card and the hospital discharge papers. His work jacket hung on the coat closet hook, and between the badge and the pocket, a thin white edge of the sealed envelope was visible. A paper border I passed every morning without looking. Monday evening at 9:30, Theo asleep, the refrigerator compressor cycling in the kitchen. Vaughan sat on the bedroom edge while I removed earrings at the dresser. He mentioned my weekend Instagram story, my hand on Theo's chest, ring visible, captioned my whole world with a blue heart, and said posting that caption while the private reality included 47 restored messages, a hotel charge, and a mutual paternity conversation answered with, "I keep wondering the same thing. was a public performance the marriage could not sustain. He asked whether I had told anyone the same controlled bargain version. Emotional only, no physical component, hotel was a cafe, because the versions circulating in my circle included none of the harbour in charge, the message thread, or Marisol's screenshot. He asked me to name one person outside this bedroom who had heard me say, "I keep wondering the same thing from my own account," because if nobody had, every person I spoke to had received an edited version, and the only complete record existed in the cloud. He offered one last path, a single honest conversation tonight. No phones, no deflection. And if the truth was survivable, he would enter Friday's appointment intending to keep the family together. I put my phone face down on the nightstand beside Theo's sterilized pacifier in its transparent case and said a man who monitored Instagram captions during maternity leave while organizing envelopes was running a compliance audit, not a marriage, and that demanding honesty while keeping sealed envelopes in a coat closet was hypocrisy dressed as concern. The compressor kicked off, and the bedroom air went dense with the pressure of words repeated too many times to land. Tuesday at 7:45 p.m. I sat on my sister Ondine's third-floor balcony overlooking a strip mall parking lot, the evening air carrying the faint grease smell from a taco truck below. I had a glass of wine and the urgency of a woman building a wall before the flood reached her street. I told Ondine that Vaughan had been building a case against me since the birth, monitoring credit cards, reading tablet messages, questioning the checkup form, tracking co-worker visits to the distribution centre. I said Marisol was a jealous wife manufacturing drama. Nadej had never fully accepted me, and Hector was feeding Vaughan conspiracy theories from the loading dock. I did not mention the 47 restored messages, the harbour in charge, the "I keep wondering the same thing" text, the 4-month timeline, or the hospital wristband Vaughan had removed from the crib rail. Ondine listened. Then she asked whether I slept with Declan during the pregnancy. My pause lasted a full second. I said the relationship was emotional, not physical, that Declan was a shoulder during a difficult pregnancy, and that intimacy never occurred. Ondine said Marisol showed Nadej a message from me. I keep wondering the same thing. In response to Declan asking, "What if it's mine?" and asked how an emotional, non-physical connection produced a mutual conversation about biological paternity. I said the message was hormonal confusion. Ondine did not argue. A wedding photo on the balcony side table, Sol and Ondine at my wedding, Vaughan between us holding champagne, caught the string lights glow. After I left, Ondine called Vivette and said the story had structural problems. Friday's appointment may not survive. Thursday afternoon, Vivette waited in her sewing room, Singer machine on the wooden table, bolts of fabric on wall shelves, a tomato-shaped pincushion beside pattern envelopes. The room smelled of cotton dust and the metallic tang of sewing machine oil. When I arrived to drop off a onesie she offered to hem, she told me to sit. She laid out what she had learned, the screenshots showing "What if it's mine?" and "I keep wondering the same thing," the $42 harbour in charge, the 4-month message thread restored by the cloud, and Marisol's pharmacy confrontation with the screenshot I could not dispute. She said a story that requires every witness to be lying: Marisol, Nadej, Hector, the credit card company, and the cloud, is not a story but a quilt sewn from scraps that do not match, and she has been sewing long enough to recognize when the pattern was cut from the wrong fabric. She said she loved me but could not call Nadej to defend a daughter whose own text message answered the paternity question with agreement. I cried and said my own mother was choosing Vaughan's family over mine. She said she was choosing the timestamp because a message sent 3 weeks before a birth belongs to the woman who typed it, and the truth she shared with the wrong man. Cotton dust drifted in the afternoon light from the window. Thursday evening, 10:15, the living room, Vaughan at the corner desk, the tablet on the charging station, the coat closet visible from the kitchen, ulced in the dark living room every 3 seconds. A synthetic rhythm matching nothing biological in the apartment. Friday morning, Vaughan returned from Flint and Poor 7:45 a.m. in a pressed button-down and dark trousers. He added a new folder to the envelope, zipped the jacket pocket, and fed Theo beneath the wooden stars while singing his grandfather's melody. His calendar read, Dr. Tran, Friday 10 a.m. Below, visible only when expanded. Bring all originals plus documentation. Thursday night, I had found 2 browser tabs on the tablet. Paternity testing process, state guidelines, and birth certificate amendment procedure. I closed both and told myself Vaughan was being dramatic. But in bed, the phrase birth certificate amendment circled behind my eyelids. The nursery wall where the framed certificate usually hung now held a single nail and a faint rectangle of lighter paint. A ghost frame marking the place where a document was displayed before Vaughan asked me to bring it to the appointment wrapped in a cloth diaper, protective packaging for a piece of paper whose authority now depended on a lab result. The lab appointment happens Tuesday at 2 p.m. in the hospital's diagnostic wing, 1 floor below the delivery room where Theo was born. I carry Theo in the car seat with the blanket tucked around him, the initials TA facing up. Vaughan stands near the intake window in a clean shirt, holding the sealed envelope with the wristband and the birth certificate inside. The intake nurse hands us both a clipboard. Through the diagnostic wing's window, the parking garage is visible. Level 3, the elevator bank, the spot where a car seat was loaded and a text was swiped, and a family began its drive home 3 months ago, on a route that has now circled back to the same building through a different entrance. Vaughan signs his clipboard. I signed mine. The nurse takes Theo gently for the collection, and the wooden star keychain on the car seat handle rotates once in the fluorescent draft, 5 hand-sanded points turning in a light that does not distinguish between the father who carved them and the result that will determine whether the carving was inheritance or generosity. 10 days later, I sent Vaughan 8 paragraphs saying the test will prove Theo is his, that one mistake should not dismantle 9 years, and that I will attend any program he chooses. He replies the next morning with 3 sentences. All communication regarding the marriage, finances, and Theo's care should go through the contact information provided last week. The lab appointment is confirmed, and Theo should arrive fed and in comfortable clothing. No greeting, no sign-off, 3 sentences and a calendar attachment with a single blue square holding the last biological question between us. Declan does not respond to my text asking to talk about the lab date. His red receipt appears. No reply follows. 3 days later, Marisol posted a photo of herself and Declan at a restaurant, his arm around her captioned, "Choosing us." Ondine does not return my calls for 4 days. Gemma stops asking about the baby at the office. The joint accounts stay frozen. I open a solo checking account with my next paycheck, and after the sublet inquiry deposit and basic expenses, the balance reads $380. The $42 Harbour Inn charge sits on the final joint statement like a hotel receipt from a lunch that cost a family. The nursery is quiet now on the nights Theo is with Vaughan. The wooden star mobile still rotates in the heating vents draft above the empty crib, and the wall where the birth certificate hung holds a single nail and a rectangle of paint, 1 shade lighter than its surroundings. A ghost frame in a room built by a man who measured twice and cut once, waiting for a result that will tell him whether the thing he built was home or stagecraft.